Thanks all of you for being here. It is unbelievable. It's an unbelievable pleasure to see this room filled with all of you, and it is a great honor to have Larry here addressing our luncheon today. Larry is part of a very short list of wonderful speakers that we've had so far. Larry has been a friend of our firm and a friend of this community for decades, and besides being an Uber businessman, he is an Ubermensch. And whenever we have called on Larry for help with initiatives with our organization, Larry has said, "How can I help you?" And we're grateful for your friendship. We're grateful for your leadership, and it is my pleasure to introduce to all of you Larry Field.
Thank you very much. Actually, I found in my life that the more money I've given away, the more money I seem to get. When I started probably in business 40 years ago, I could only give maybe $5 or $10, but it very quickly grew. And I just felt that it was a great part of my success, of my being able to give to other people, to other organizations. I've known BZ Kravitz for over 30 years. We were just sitting here talking. I asked him, how long has it been? It's about 30 years. And how we met was a young friend of mine, whose mother I knew very well, got on drugs and moved to San Diego. And she was really desperate. Her husband had passed away. He was about, 18 maybe. And BZ went down to San Diego to help him out. Spent maybe 5 or 6 days with him and really turned him around. And I never forgot that. So anytime you call, you always get a positive answer from it. Now you'll up the odds. What I really want to talk about is I'm in the real estate business. I'm an owner of millions of feet of properties. And in fact, just before I came here today, I made a new letter of intent with Walmart. And they didn't start out having plans to have that tenant. I bought a large property in El Segundo. In fact, I don't know if anybody watches Fox here, but we've been on, Frank Erie and I, Frank was an architect, have been on the television set up by El Segundo, trying to attract visitors to El Segundo. So they show pictures of different things. And we bought that property because my partner, Frank Erie, world-renowned architect, we bought 2 properties for him. And the last time I did this in the marina, by the time I got around to look for more property, everybody said, well, we have this headquarters of this worldwide architect. Now the price is much more. So I figured, well, I'll be smart this time. We bought the property for Frank, for his offices, and then I bought a very large 12-acre piece with 190,000 feet of buildings. The buildings had 2 big tenants in them. The leases were coming up: aerospace, Northrop Aviation, and IBM. But I had, I wasn't worried about it. I figured, well, with Frank's announcement of the big new office, that we would do well. It turned out that with the massive recession that we had, he had to fire 100 people, let alone hire. And he said to me, gee, I don't think I need that property that you bought. So he said, but if you want, I'll stay, I'll keep the leases. No, we'll do something else with it. But the larger piece that I went and bought in anticipation of his world headquarters I just felt that it would be very good because it's very hard for a company to get a campus. That is to have 10, 12 acres in Los Angeles, both with buildings and parking, etc. So I knew in the long run it would go. And as it did, it was just, I guess it was Monday, it was Wednesday. We signed an agreement with Walmart, and we're going to change the zoning from industrial warehouse to retail. And I'm sure that they're going to be proceeding with it because it's very hard for Walmart to get in most of the cities here. The unions always attack them, always sue them, they'll hold them out. So that is a new situation that we just had. But you know, to be a success, and I think back about it, I come from a very, very modest family. My father had a grocery store that was maybe twice the size of this room, maybe 1.5 times. And I worked there when I started at about 12 years old. And I swore that I would never have a retail store, whatever I did. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I would never have a retail store. But the things I learned in the store and how to act toward people was taught to me by my father, and to have integrity and honor and honesty by my mother. A little story about that. When I was a kid, there were candy stores, and they sold comic books. So after school one day, I'm in the candy store, I'm looking around, and a friend of mine comes up, and I saw I was going to buy 2 comic books that were a nickel apiece. He says, you know, Larry, he says, we found out that if we put one book in the other, and we just say we're going to buy 2, there's really 4, and you give the guy a dime. Okay. So we both do it, and we both walk out. Now I go home, and my mother sees 4 comic books. How'd you get 4? They were nickel apiece. I only gave you a dime. Well, I didn't know what to say. First of all, I'm a terrible liar. So it took about maybe a minute and a half, and I told her what had happened. I met my friend, and he told me how to do it. So she calls my father at the store, who comes home, because we were about a block away, and says to me, how could you do something like that, Larry? I mean, we have a store. How would you like it if somebody came into our grocery store and they took a can of something without knowing it, but we didn't charge them for it? You could never do that. You must always be honest. And no matter what, you have to take things back. So I already said, okay, I'll bring back the comic book. He says, you have to do more than that. You have to go to Mr. Birnbaum, who owned the store, and tell him that you stole these 2 comic books and you're putting them back. And that you ask him to forgive you for doing it. I was maybe 8 or 9 years. Very, very difficult, but I had to do it. And I went back and I told him that. And it was almost like I got a reward. I mean, he said, well, that's really good of you. I'm really glad that you did that. I'm glad that you told me the truth, that what you did, and that I'm sure you'll never do it again. Well, of course, not only will I never do it again, I wouldn't ever touch anybody's money or goods. And I had opportunity for that too, when I first began syndicating, raising money from outside people. And things in one partnership wouldn't be going so well. So I began to think about it. Maybe I'll borrow some money from this one and put it into that one. Fortunately, I had a bookkeeper from the Philippines who said, you can't do that, Larry. I said, why? She said, well, if something happens, now you lent that money. It's not yours. It's all these other people's money. For this one, and what would you do? You can't pay it back. You owe them that money. I said, yeah, I guess you're right. So I never did it, and I probably wouldn't have anyway. But honesty and integrity is something very important, because in the introduction, you heard that this is a person of great success, but also well thought of. And that's what you have. You have your good name, and that's primarily what I trade on, because you go to a bank, and they know you already, either good or bad. And without going to a bank, in any business, you can't succeed. You have to have the ability to borrow money to make your business grow. What else I wanted to talk about is that how I learned about myself, and how do I become an entrepreneur? How do you become a person who has your own business? You don't have to have a job. A job is very hard to give up. It's like a crutch. And you find that you're afraid, because if you're earning a salary, it's a good salary, you don't want to leave it. But unless you do things like that, strike off on your own, and have confidence in yourself, because if you don't have that, you'll never make it at all. I learned about myself when I had, the one job I had in life outside of my real estate business was working for Lever Brothers, introducing Dove soap. And I became the star. I mean, personally, I sold about $16 million worth of Dove soap, the most anybody had ever done in the history of the company. And I never got a promotion, I never got a raise. But all that took place in the space of 1 year. And the reason I did that is that I learned from the people that I would call upon. And I went around the country. So for 1 year, I didn't go home. That was another very great experience. At the time I was doing it, it's very difficult. Just kind of imagine you're in Gadsden, Alabama, or Birmingham, or Atlanta, Georgia, and you don't know anybody. It's a Friday, and nobody's around. I mean, you can go to a bar, but how I found people was I'd go down the main street of Birmingham, and at the time they would have the name of the pharmacist on the window of the store. So it would say Joe Shapiro, registered pharmacist. So I'd go into the store that had a Jewish name, was the pharmacist, and I'd walk in, and there would be a girl in the front, and she'd say, "Can I help you?" She knew I was a salesman, the guy with, walking on a Friday with a tie and a cap, hat, and a briefcase. And she said, and I said, "Lever Brothers." And she said, "Oh no, I'll take care of that. Mr. Shapiro doesn't do those things." I said, "No, he's got to see it. It's very expensive." I continue to walk to the back, and the drugstores have these platforms where the pharmacist says, "Look up." So he looks down, he says, "Yeah, can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm with Lever Brothers. See Maisie in the front." I said, "No, I saw Maisie. You have to see this yourself." "Well, I'm busy." And this is magic. I learned that when I first started with Lever Brothers, in the first little grocery store. I said, "Okay, Mr. Shapiro, I'll wait." And the drugstores in the South, primarily, or the Midwest, always had chairs for people to wait for their prescription. So I'd sit down, invariably, 5 minutes or less. "Okay," so you come down. It's very hard to say I'm busy when you're not that busy. You can certainly come down. So I showed him the Dove soap, and this is a quarter, and this is 15 cents. He'd say, "Oh no, that's way too expensive. Nobody would pay that." I said, "But they are paying it. Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, we opened this and it gangbusters." "No, I don't think so." I said, "Well, you have Walgreens down the street, and they're going to take 50 cases for a store." Of course, he never believed me. No, I don't want it." "Stop boy, go upstairs." He looks down, he says, "What are you waiting for?" I said, "It would be a disservice to you if I left. mean, I know that you'd be very unhappy next week when people come in and you didn't have it. And you know what? You blame me. Then why didn't I sell them a couple of bars? I'll wait. What are you gonna wait for? I decided I don't want it. Nah, think about it. And sure enough, within 5 minutes, okay, all right, I'll take a couple of each. I said, no, you gotta take 6 of each. And payment. So paid in cash, and take 6 of each. And then I'd say, Mr. Shapiro, is there a synagogue in Birmingham? You could see the guy's jaw dropped. I mean, you know, Lever Brothers, got blondish crew cut at the time, probably 50 pounds lighter. And he'd say, wait a minute. He rush upstairs, he calls his wife. Yo, there's a young guy, good-looking guy from Lever Brothers. And he asked about a synagogue. So she said, schmuck, tell him to come home and have dinner with us. So we'll go. And of course, that's what I did for the most part, every place that I traveled after that. But Birmingham is where I first started. But I learned to have confidence in myself, and how you influence people really is to listen to them. I talk to people, and they did most of the talking, and how people feel you're listening is just every once in a while ask a question about something they said. Oh, yeah, and do that 2 or 3 times, they're absolutely certain you are listening. And you do better that way, because I never missed an order. I mean, the guy would finish talking, and at the end of it, he'd be, you know, Walgreens or a big supermarket chain, and he'd end up by saying, well, how much should I buy of this? And you know, you're sharing the decision with somebody, and they feel at that point you are. But again, you have to feel good about yourself. And most things are bashert, I find. If something happens, like with my friend Frank Gehry, about the situation got bad, he had to fire people, something else came up. An opportunity now, because the cities would be against letting Walmart in, now they really need money. Every Walmart brings between $1 million and $1,200,000 a year just in taxes to that city. And maybe 300 to 400 people are employed, or else Elsa Goodman may not approve them. I am certain that they will approve them to come into the city. And it's a very big deal for me. I mean, in the space of 2 years to make, you know, multi-million dollars on that deal. But how we even got into real estate? At the end of my days with Lever Brothers, I was wondering, how do I make $1 million? How do I make $1 million? And my father never made more than $5,000 to $6,000 a year, not a month, a year. And I had no family money. I decided I'll go into the securities business. I took a test at a big securities broker. And they said, in 3 weeks, we're gonna have a class, and you can start, and we'll pay you $400 a month or $500 a month. And at the end of 6 months, you become a salesman, you'll be selling securities and making a commission. I walked downstairs on Madison Avenue, New York, and I run into a classmate of mine. And we stopped, had coffee. He asked me what he'd been doing. I told him about Lever Brothers, told him about the drugstore, the whole thing. And he said, you know, he says, and I told him what I decided, either I would go into real estate or securities. So he said, why don't you come into real estate? He says, I'm opening an office this afternoon. I'm leaving my father-in-law, and I'm going to open my own office. So I said, no, I don't know anything about it. I don't want to work for you. He said, no, you don't have to work. We'll be partners. I said, yeah, we're going to get a lawyer. No, we don't need a lawyer. Let's write it down on a piece of paper. So he was so insistent about it. And he said, look, in 3 weeks, you know, you got to wait 3 weeks anyway. So I said, you know what, you're right. So we filled out a form that said, Al Bronstein and Larry Field are partners, are 50-50 partners in a company called A. Bronstein Company, real estate brokers. And we put in our money, we rented the store, and we were wildly successful. Within 2 years, we had 8 or 9 salespeople. We moved from 149th Street in the Bronx to 42nd and 5th, and then sold the business to our salesmen. We now decided to go with a group of men to develop property. And I just felt there was too big a group already, and I went off on my own. But everything was sort of a shift, you know, and sometimes you let it go and just mostly have confidence in yourself. I came out to Los Angeles 1965. I was representing the Japanese government for the World's Fair, which is a story in itself, which is very interesting how the Japanese operate. They only want to operate with people who they get to know and who they trust. And it was an interesting learning experience with them. And again, it was really good that I was very straight, because at any deviation, any feeling they have that you're not being honest with them, it was good business with them. We came out here and just started cold in downtown Los Angeles. I started out by managing property for Lowe's company, which was Bob and Larry Tisch. A guy named Harry Hemsley was a big real estate guy in New York. And starting with that in 1965 to now, I accumulated about 4 million feet of buildings and shopping centers and office buildings. And all of it was done with either borrowing money from a bank, which is really cheaper than borrowing it from friends. But you always have the friend in as a partner, no matter what happens. In fact, I point out to people the early syndications I did in the early 70s, where people would say gave 20,000 or 25,000, which was a big deal at the time. Today, and yesterday, and a week ago, a couple of years ago, they would receive each year the amount they originally invested, and they still have a percentage of the property. That's why one of the things about real estate is that it really enhances your net worth and value. The older it gets, sometimes the better it is. The wealthiest people in the cities of New York, London, Paris, any place you want to go, Tokyo, you'll find are in the real estate business. Today, of course, the internet is making some major changes, which is still up in the air. But before I do anything else, is there anybody has a question that would want to ask?
Larry, there's a lot of young people in the conference room here, many of whom have not seen the cycles or have not really come of age in the last boom cycle, and everybody's acutely aware of what has happened with the downturn that we're 3 years from today, and it would be great to get your perspective on what happened with the turn of the last cycle and the deep recession that we're coming out of, and what your visibility is. Where do you see the opportunities as we're entering a new cycle?
Sure. Well, one of the main reasons for the downturn was that people were not doing anything that made business sense. In other words, you didn't even need to have a job. You can go in and get a 90% loan or a 95% loan. And that was one of the things. If the person never could handle it, that they could maybe afford a $1,200, $1,500 a month in rent. And here they had a house, and just the interest on it would be $1,500 or $1,800. So that was one of the causes of the downturn. There was a lot of over-leveraging where you completely borrow all of the money for every penny for the business. And there should be equity in it, as a matter of fact. I don't think we do more than 65% borrowing now. Although I must say, in the 70s and 80s, I would borrow 95% or 100%. But properties were much cheaper then, much less. And as the rents were very low at the time, and as they began going up, whatever you had went up with it. Was the rents would go up, and then all of a sudden the building went from $2 million to $5 million. So you had security in that at least. And what I see for the coming future, I mean, the government's going to have to get hold of its spending. I mean, no matter what, or else we'll end up like Greece or Ireland or Portugal. I mean, every one of the countries in Europe are underwater, no matter what. Maybe Germany is at a break even, but that's about it. And just as an individual, a country has to live within some means. And I just don't know politically if anybody has the courage to do it, because they're going to have to stop funding something that they feel they should. On balance, following all other recessions, there should be a major upturn coming. I'm not so sure. It may come. It may come. I don't think it's going to be worse. I think we've gone through the worst now, and even the president is going to have to really consider what he wants to do about borrowing money and tightening the reins on what he wants. I would venture to say that it will go up. It may not go up as much as it normally would have, but I think it will go up. I think interest rates will rise somewhat, not too much, because buying something today is very difficult. I mean, the good property nobody wants to sell, and marginal property, you don't want to buy it. You don't buy somebody else's headache. So I would say that long range, it would be on the upside. Maybe not steeply, but marginally. Anybody else? Yeah.
Looking at the upside of the market, do you see a specific sector, commercial, retail, industrial, which would be a better trend going upward over time?
Well, the safest real estate investment is residential, that is multi-residential apartment houses. If I was doing something now, I probably would go into that, because you may make 2 or 3%, maybe 4% on really a well-located property. But in the long run, which is less than a year, long run in apartments, you'll end up by being able to raise the rent. Most apartments don't have leases. I mean, it's like a hotel. If you buy a hotel and the downside, and you don't overpay, those room rates could go from 100 to 110. That's a 10% increase. It's a big deal. In office buildings or warehouses, you have leases that have anywhere from 2 to 8 years to go. So I would really look at residential if I was doing it now. That really is the safest. No matter what you put in, if you put in $1 million equity, the maximum risk you have is 5% for making a mistake. So it may cost you $50,000, maybe $60,000 if you had to sell it. The other products are more. You really need money to hold on to it. I think this year it cost me, $2 million just to make the payments on properties. We didn't have money coming in, or we were making deals with our tenants where we give them 2, 3, 4 months off, just no pay at all, just to keep them. We tried to usually pay half the rent, but better to keep somebody and have something than nothing at all.
There's a question here and here.
Yeah.
Where do you see the trends in retail, specifically shopping centers? What are some of the shopping center developers doing right now, the landlords? Where do you see that? How do you see that evolving in the next 5 years?
I know, to me, it's a little murky. I have mostly food anchored, Ralph's and Gelson's and things like that, centers. But it's going to be very interesting to see. Somebody just mentioned the internet. A lot of people buy, not groceries, but they buy clothing or buy other things on the internet. I mean, especially when, not me, I very rarely do it. I bought a pair of totes. That was a big deal. I was amazed that they actually came, they were delivered, they were the same size I ordered. But anyway, but I think that's going to make a change in the shopping trend. I mean, people go shopping and go to stores just almost recreationally, because on a Saturday, if you feel like doing something, especially women who buy 90% of all the goods come from the stores, find it interesting to be among other people and buying something rather than on your computer. It's easy on the computer, you can get it right away. But I think it's going to maybe change the store's makeup, the shopping center's makeup. Because if you can get the clothing at the Gap or something, there'll only be half the number of Gap stores because they won't need them. They'll do it all on the internet, which is cheaper for them too. Yeah.
When was the last deal you bought?
About 2 years ago, we bought a property in El Segundo. Yeah. It's good also, by the way, to add to your portfolio in a place you have other property. So we bought a building there. So we have like 5 or 6 properties now in El Segundo. So it makes it easy. We know the market. We get to know it pretty well. And now we know that there's going to be a Walmart coming in. That's a great advantage. I also kept the pad on the parking lot as part of my deal. So I'll put in a McDonald's or something like that, a Pollo Loco with a drive-through.
There's a question over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned less pasture. So in a year where you're plowing in $2 million into your property, how do you stay level-headed, reasonable, stay true to the course? Where do you find your strength, or to kind of put more money after, I don't want to say good money after bad, but invest in your head?
Well, obviously it was Tulsa, Oklahoma, say, and it's been devastated, and the supermarket moved out, and then the centers happened. I would walk away. I mean, I wouldn't put it in money. I'm talking about one of the best markets in the United States, which is Southern California. And even a non-anchored center can do very well. And it will turn around. And whatever you paid for it will be less than what it will go for in 2 or 3 years. Because the best properties people are not selling. I haven't run into any big bargains, or else I would have bought some too. But all the properties that I put money into were formerly more warehouse industrial, and I changed it to creative office, say. And I know that'll come back. It's right in the middle of the city. I mean, I got stuff along Colorado Boulevard here in Santa Monica, or Culver City, and West LA. Having something there, or Beverly Hills, or you can't really miss. You may have to hold it for a while, but you can't miss. That's why you should not go in shortly.
Larry, with all the problems at the state level in California, billions of dollars of deficits and the government as it sits right now. Do you see that as being a major threat potentially to the future value of real estate in Southern California?
Well, it's something that the buyers of real estate will be thinking about. If they're coming to a state that is desperate for money, and rather than use it to fix the roads, they don't, or that they raise the state taxes, some people would leave. But right now, with our population, it's still a very good place to have a shopping center or apartments, or even offices, although offices are different. Century City is an established area now for that. But, yeah, people will worry about it. I'm just curious myself what the next government's gonna do. Yeah.
What has been your experience in the last couple of years working with banks and distressed properties? Have you tried to work with banks to acquire some, and just how did?
I don't know, I never did well. I tried, because I figured, well, it would be cheaper. But somehow, dealing with the bank, it was either too soon, or they had a favorite person they dealt with. But if you can, that's a great way to buy property. I mean, they'll take a loss of 20, 30, 40%. But with them, you have to move quickly and have cash. But I've tried it. I mean, I have wonderful relationships. I use mostly City National Bank or Wells Fargo, and but they don't. I can't seem to make a deal with them on buying property.
In multifamily, what would your buying criteria be at this point?
Well, you'd want first is location, and then the quality of the building. If it's in a great location, you should count on going in and fixing up the building so it really looks good. So you want a building that you can do that with, and not just a dingbat that, no matter what you put into it, it'll always look inferior. But that would be the location would be the criteria, the most criteria, the biggest criteria would be that. And after that is you don't want more than 10 or 15% of single units. In other words, singles rather than at least a one-bedroom apartment. You want to have no singles at all, and 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom or far better. So that's what else to look at, and how has it been maintained?
So you're not even looking at cap rates or?
No. It doesn't matter. I never could figure it out anyway, so.
What neighborhoods do you think are attractive now from another residential? What neighborhoods do you think are attractive now from
Well, the
another
ones
residential?
that you know, I mean, the Brentwoods, the Westwood, the Culver City, Santa Monica, any place over there, or West LA, Beverly Hills.
That could be the highlight
So
statement.
the best locations that people, where you would want to live. If you didn't have a house or didn't have a place where you're living now, would you live there yourself? Yeah.
Your thoughts on downtown? Is that
I don't know, downtown is funny. I was downtown at one time, and I thought, well, maybe I should buy here. Well, I would have had to wait 15 years if anything could happen. And our downtown is different than New York or Chicago or any place else, Atlanta. I mean, the other downtowns people come to. I mean, they go there at night, they have restaurants, they have clubs, and, et cetera. Here we don't. Downtown is like desolate. I mean, you ever go, even today, you go down there and it's just like dark. I mean, you wonder who's living here. Although there are a lot of people living there now, but they're all mostly single. Some couples, but mostly single people. And I just don't know if I would trust it to come back up.
Any more questions?
I have a question. You know, for the slogan, not so bad, where'd that come
Let's see.
from? 30 years I've been waiting to ask that question.
That's really a good question. He's absolutely right.
What's the question?
It's something that I always say. If you ask me, how are you, Larry? I'll say, not so bad.
The name of your company is?
Not so bad. It's called NSB. Actually, a quick little, how that even came about. I had a partner in 1975, 76. Before that, it was a downturn, and I was really underwater because if you figured out the real value of my property, and then what I owed was more than the value of all the property if I sold it. So I thought to myself, I need a cash business. You buy property and, it takes time to come around. So I had met the vice president of Laurelwood a year before that. I called him up and I said, maybe you'd like to go into business of your own, because he was bitching about his brother-in-law, whose name is Larry Weinberg, who had owned the company. And he said, I was better than him, I could have run it, I actually did it, I made this whole big company. It turned out not to be true at all. But anyway, I figured, well, I'll tell you what, how about getting together and we'll build houses. And you don't even have to take the risk on the commercial side. I'll keep that myself and we'll just do houses. No, I want to be partners and everything. I said, all right, okay. So we went out looking for property, and every property we looked at, I'm talking about lots. He said, well, I don't know, he was afraid. I didn't realize that, but he was. So I found something in a property that Bill Bone from the desert had lost. And we bought 13 lots, and then with a group of other guys that put together, we divided the balance of the 200 lots. So we had that property, but I didn't want him to build on it because that was in Deep Canyon. And it turned out to be a very big hit. But what I did was I sold it to another developer. I sold our quarter share to another developer for $500,000. And bought some property in Oxnard. I mean, cheap property, because that's what he was good at, building little houses and doing well with them. So we began building those houses. The good part of having a tract house project is it had 150 lots. So we would build 25 houses at a time, and they would be $32,000 or $34,000 or $36,000. If they went very well, the next 25, we charged $40,000, not $32,000. And then the third time, we would go to 45 or 50, and then to 60. So if we were making a 15% return on $30,000, right, that's $4,500. What did we make on $60,000? We made that money plus the difference that we're getting. We're making like $30,000 a house on these little dingbat houses. And we went on to build another 4 years, different houses in Camarillo, mostly Camarillo and Oxnard. Well, we were doing so well. I would look in the paper for the Eli Broad's company, Kaufman and Broad, and we did better than them. I mean, we made like in 1971, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, 76, 7, 8, 9. We probably made about close to $5 million a year. And this is from a guy who I didn't know from building. I mean, I could sell houses, but not build them. Or find the land, I did all of that. But to give you an idea what kind of character I was dealing with, and we only lasted for 4 years, total 5. The first tract that we were going to build, we had to go to the bank to get some money. So we go to the bank that I was using. sitting there, and he said that it was for $1 million. And he approved the deal for the $1 million. And then he said, but you know, Dick, I noticed in your statement, you have $100,000 in 10 S&Ls. Why don't you give us some of that money? After all, we're lending $1 million. And he says, well, I don't know about that. What if we don't pay you back? You may want to keep it. Now, you never tell a guy who's going to lend you $1 million that you may not pay him back. Never. So he brings it up. So I said, Joe, he's only kidding. So we walk out, and I said, if you don't do this tomorrow and move $500,000 of those CDs into that bank, our partnership is over. Forget it. Well, he did. But the not so bad came when I didn't know what else to say, as we were just reeking in money on these houses. And I'd say, we're doing wonderful, we're doing great, we're doing extraordinary, we're doing fabulously. And I ran out of all these superlatives. I said, well, not so bad. And that's how that came into being. But how it got to be the name of the company is even more interesting. He's leaving his wife, and he wants to split up. So in the split, out of the blue, he says, after we agreed upon what I should pay him to buy him out, he says, you know, you can't use Rich Law anymore. That was the name we were using. I said, why? He says, well, you may bring disrepute on that name, and everybody knows half of it is mine, if we was named Richard. I said, you gotta be kidding, Dick. What's the matter with you? No, I said, okay. So I go home. I tell my wife, shit, I love that name. I love Rich Law because it sounds like such an old English name, you know? And I said, and I don't want to call it Larry Field or anything to do with that. I want another kind of name. So she said, why don't you call it Not So Bad? You say that all the time. Nah, it doesn't sound good. She said, then use the initials. Use NSB. I thought about it. Well, everybody will know. I bet you they don't. Try it. I said, okay. So he ran a test that I said to people, yeah, I'm forming a new company. It's going to be called NSB. Oh, and she also said, look at the companies, ABC, CBS, NBC. They all use initials. They're doing pretty well. So I did that, and she not even that, she was 1,000% right. Almost no one put it together. Almost no one put the name of NSB into saying the words Not So Bad. So that's how that came into being. It was forced on me.
Solomon, do you want to? I think we're about time. Well, thank you, Larry, so much.
More than
It's
that.
really enjoyed the story.